Roger, I think we start with maybe a short description what we have in this exhibition. The exhibition shows three very different things: photos, a shack with installations, and two videos. It kind of shows your artistic range, but it's a very precise selection of what we are showing. Can you give us an overview of these things?
Yeah, well, we have two series here from the photographs. One series called Asylum of the Birds, and every photograph you see here at the exhibition from that period has a bird in it. The other series is called Roger's Rats, and every picture in this series has rats. They're all square format photographs taken by film, and I guess they could be taken, or they were shot over the last 7-8 years or so. So we have the photographs outside the shack, and then you go inside the space and you go into a so-called Roger Ballen world, which is my world and your world.
When I visited you in Johannesburg, I had the pleasure and the honor to come with you into your studio and to watch you creating an image. And I saw there how you very slowly, together with Marguerite, together with your assistants, created a background for a photo. You tried out, you changed again. It's a very slow process. There's not a plan, there's not a drawing before or an exact concept what exactly you want to do, but in a way everybody knows what the aim could be. And when I saw then at the Inside Out Center the shack and the installations you have in the center, I realized that these installations, they are kind of the background, the possible backgrounds for photos.
Yeah, well, I think that the shack somehow or another represents some of the places that I've worked in now and worked in in the past. So I have worked in places like this where I've created photographs, some better, some worse. And I've worked in places, for example, you'll see in some of my other projects where the wall's concrete and there's just drawings on concrete. And I've worked in other places where I guess the whole house is falling apart, and I've found places in the house or the building where I've been able to take the picture.
So in a way, the shack is three-dimensional, what the photos are in 2 dimensions. And while looking at the videos, I find myself again in a new dimension, but in the same aesthetic and same mindset also of works. So it's not a break; it's a going over or going on. What do you do?
Well, this is very important. It's very important that all the work crisscrosses each other. They interact with each other, and as they interact, they expand the aesthetic.
The elements we are showing in the exhibition, the photos, the videos, and the shack are all elements which you developed in the maybe last 10 years in your work. You started with photos of found villages and found people in these villages in South Africa, and then developed into an art world where you would more and more create what we see. Quite a straight path.
This is correct, and it is important. You have to build on what you do. That's how you get somewhere, I think, in the arts. You can't just expect to have a dream one night and everything changes. It's usually through the work. And one work leads to the next, which leads to the next, and it's all created by the same mind in a way. Photography is it's a product of the mind. If you hold a camera in your hand, well, some people photograph a cloud, some people photograph a tree, some photograph themselves. How they do it, why they do it is all different. So, You know, in a way, everything in photography is staged in its own way by the mind of the photographer. So now the other issue here, you asked about my aesthetic. I never saw myself as a social documentary photographer. I'm not really focused on poverty. I'm not really focused on social problems. I'm not really focused on the haves and the have-nots. That's not of interest to me. If you went and spoke to Beckett, and you asked Beckett, are you worried about poverty? Is your plays about poverty? He said, no, you got it wrong here. You got it wrong. I'm dealing with the mind, the human condition. And one of the reasons that the work, I think, has an impact on people is not necessarily because it's showing poverty. It's showing something subconsciously, something that attacks the subconscious mind in a way that finds a place in the mind where the mind feels unresolved. It's finding something there that triggers something else that people are subconsciously aware of but don't necessarily want to contend with.
When I visited you in Johannesburg, I saw a shack in your Inside Out Center for the Art which you just opened. I saw this shack and now it's here.
The shack is more than just a shack. It's not only a physical object, it's a mental, psychological object as well. So when you enter the shack, in a way, you're entering your own mind in places that you may never have been before. Perhaps the viewer here has never been in a shack, but the shack will force the viewer into a place in his mind which might be like an unknown place like the shack here. So in a way, I'm responsible for creating that place, but if you don't relate to it or don't remember it, well then it doesn't exist, I guess. She was in a bad state. She broke her leg. I think she broke her leg. I wasn't sure exactly. And they didn't know what to do with her. She just lied on the floor and cried and screamed, and nobody did anything about it until we took her to the hospital. And this, I guess, was, in a way, was the inspiration for what we did here. Everything you see here, in some way or another, comes from years, decades of experience in places like this, with people like this, and with a mind like this, with a mind like yours. It's not only about the people, it's also about the way we use our aesthetic, our creative imagination.
Okay, I think we should say something about the call of the void.
Yeah, well, it took us a while to figure out what we should call this show. And we came up with a few ideas. And then the idea, I think the word void came out. What did we mean by the call of the void? That's always the issue. So I guess that's not so difficult to define. So I guess we start with the concept of where did we come from? Well, we can't really say where we came from. Where? I don't know. Nothingness, void. What are we doing here? I don't really know. What am I doing here? I don't really know. Can't answer the question. And where are we going to end up? Well, he's looking up out of here. He's put his head through the ceiling. He's looking up at a dark sky. Will we end up there? Will we end up here? I don't know. I'm not sure. So in a way, the call of the void sort of brings forth these three questions. Where did I come from? What am I doing here? And where am I going?
But then we also thought that we had to bring the real stuff here to show what it really is like in those shacks and stuff. So the objects here is the real thing. I mean, that is what it's like.
Much of what you see here was found in places that we've worked in over the years. We couldn't work in places like this in a million years unless the people trusted us, unless the people liked us, unless the people found it interesting and worthwhile for us to take photographs in places like this. And only because we feel comfortable in these places can we make the type of photographs that we've made over the years. My interest in drawing and integrating drawing into my photographs came about 30 years ago when I visited many people in their homes, and the children and the people drew on the walls. And I thought this was very creative. I thought it was really interesting. And a normal person, quote unquote, walking into a place like this would say, oh, this is dirty. But most importantly, what would they say? These people are insane. And I thought this was an act of creativity. And so beginning about 30 years ago, maybe even longer, I started to integrate drawings into my pictures. And for a long time, it was purely documentary. There were drawings on the wall, and I would make the photographs with the people or the objects with the drawings on the wall. And slowly but surely, sometimes then, like we do now, we would ask people to make a drawing. These drawings come from South Africa. And many of these drawings that you see on the walls were actually integrated into some of my photographs.
I think the integration is quite important, because otherwise, as you say, it won't mean anything.
So, won't mean anything.
And I think you've become an expert now at integrating the drawings into the photographs. Yeah. I think what is important in creating an installation is the placement of the objects. So that's why we decided to put this figure here.
No, I agree. That's why I was so pleased that the museum and Andres agreed to allow us to build the shack here, because if we had a figure like this, well, I like the figure a lot, but in a normal museum, it's just the figure sitting there, and he has some sort of impact. But by putting him in the shack in front of the window, it creates a whole nother reality. He's now a sort of like a real person in the shack, peering at you as you walk by. So it creates a much stronger interaction between the viewer and the object.
But I think your work comes from the real.
It really does come from the real. I've sort of worked in the real for decades and decades and decades. And initially I was a street photographer. And I think one of the things that has allowed me to get to this point where we're making sculptures, we're making installations, videos, is I was trained as a photographer. And the whole idea of the chance, the moment, the crux, the decisive moment or point that Cartier-Bresson brought up is inherent in my way of thinking and making art. To see the chance moment, to wait for it, to create it, to take advantage of it. And that's part of, I guess my training in a way. So when we get to a place, we're always looking around, waiting for that thing to happen, for that gap to open that we can start to build on. And maybe it's in itself is that one chance that allows us to create the photograph or provides the basis of these installations. Or there might be 100 other chances like this that we have to take advantage of, one leading to one thing and the other leading to another.